I'm Grant Saviers from the Computer History Museum as a trustee, and I'm here this morning with Finis Connor in Austin, Texas, to talk to Finis about his history in the storage business and other things. Finis has been named the epitome of Silicon Valley serial entrepreneurs. Fast cars, big boats, airplanes, and multiple houses. Well-deserved, I think, in history. And because of his huge successes in 3 successive storage companies in Shugart Associates, Seagate Technology, and Connor Peripherals. Well, good morning, Finis.
Good morning, Grant.
So we usually like to do this as a timeline, start in your early life. I understand you were born and raised part of the youth in Gadsden, Alabama. That's a long way from Silicon Valley.
We couldn't even spell Silicon Valley in those days. Yes, Gadsden was where my family grew up, and I was the last of 5 boys in the family. Dad was a carpenter. We had a good life, happy. Moved from there to Dallas, Texas for a few years with the family, and then Florida. Florida was nice, except for the mosquitoes and things like that.
And that was Orlando prior to Disney?
Orlando before Disney, that's for sure. Yeah, and before they messed up all the good fishing lakes.
So the next step was Silicon Valley, San Jose. So how'd you get there, and why'd you go?
Well, when I got out of high school, and I had a summer job where I was working, loading conduit piping in the morning to go to Cape Canaveral and bread at night. I thought there might be a better way to make a living than that. My brother, who lived in San Jose, invited me to come out there, so I bought a one-way train ticket, and 2 days later I was in San Jose.
What was the train ride like? This is what, 1963 or so?
63 or so, yeah. It was interesting because I'd obviously never been on a train, and certainly not that long. Had never had any beer to drink, and I met soldiers on there, and I learned how to gamble poorly, I might say, and drink some beer. So it was an education just in itself.
So Silicon Valley became the home for quite a while, and how'd you find a job there, and how'd that go?
You know, when I got there, my brother, I stayed with him and his roommate for a while, sleeping on the couch, and someone said I should go down to a company that places engineers and technical people in different companies, and it's called, I think it was Electromech. So I went down there, and they said, well, what can you do? And I said, well, I can do anything. And they said, well, can you type? And I said, of course. Had never seen a typewriter or worked on one, but I learned how to type, and I got a job at IBM typing engineering specifications down there.
And that was in the IBM storage division at the time?
I believe it was,
yeah.
And in the engineering department. So that was kind of an interesting trip for me.
Yeah. So that began a job career. Where did that lead to?
Well, it led to a lot of different areas. One is I felt I had to get a college degree, and I went to San Jose State and got a degree there, but I tried different kinds of things. I was a salesman for a semiconductor company, and I was very poor at that. But slowly but surely, I found a job at Memorex in their engineering department again, and that's where I met Al Shugart. Actually, that department reported to him. And so I got to know Al. We became good friends, and kind of that was the beginning of my trip in the storage industry.
Yeah, Al Shugart's quite a legend, and you and he went on to bigger things later. But what was Memorex like in those days?
Memorex was interesting. Al had a lot of people out of IBM in the engineering department. They were doing some great things there. One of the products he had was a floppy disk that they used as a program load device. And he got it, and he said, well, maybe we could turn this into an OEM product, because they had sold 6 already at around $1,500 a piece. So he said, Finis, can you do something about this? And I said, well, let me look into it. First thing I recommend is cut the price in half. So we sold a few more, but what was happening in that time frame was IBM was replacing the key punch with a floppy disk-based system. And we looked at that, and about 6 or 7 of us decided to leave Memorex and form the Shugart Associates.
And who were those founders?
Well, if I can remember them all, of course, Al, myself, Don Wartner, Herb Thompson, Otis Page, Al, he was a great engineer. Sorry, I can't remember that one.
Doug Mann?
Doug Mann was not
Okay.
in the Shugart Associates.
Okay. All right, that was later.
Right, that was later.
Okay. And so that company gets started in Silicon Valley, nearby IBM?
It was nearby Memorex, yeah.
Nearby
so
Memorex.
we had a little small place nearby, and we got that going. We had a little funding for it, and had some interesting times in getting that company started. But the problem with that is they tried to do a printer and they tried to do systems and all kinds of things. And really, what we thought we were doing is starting with floppy disk, but quickly. Other things came on the plate and it consumed a lot of the cash we had.
And then the market exploded for floppies. I mean, everybody had to have floppies in their computer or desktop almost at the time.
Yes, we had 8-inch floppies at the time, and some people were using those as program load device and using them in desktop computers and things like that. So it was a good business, but finally, we came up with the 5 1/4 inch. People said they needed a smaller one. You'll have to correct me if that's wrong.
Well, yeah, I remember Al came to DEC at the time I was running storage there, and this was his prospecting, I think, to see if the 8-inch floppy was going to have any demand. And he put out a number like, would you buy 10,000 of these? And I said, well, we'll probably buy almost that many a month. I think that quite surprised him in terms of the opportunity, which turned out to be much larger than that worldwide.
Yeah, the floppy was quite successful in the earlier days, and that was kind of a period where things were getting smaller, computers and systems were getting smaller, and so although it didn't have a lot of capacity on it, it provided an interchange capability of data for people to use.
Right. Let's back up for a second. I mean, I think at one time you served in the Navy Reserves also. Is that true? Or?
Yes, I was in the Naval Air Reserves out of Moffett Field, and got trained back in Memphis, Tennessee, and I went to the meetings every month, and we had to go away and do a week or something at the time. So I went through that.
Well, thanks for your service.
Yeah.
So Shugart's going along, printer business,
system
floppy,
business,
systems business, a whole bunch of things.
right?
And at some point, you and Al and the other groups decide, well, maybe there's another opportunity we ought to pursue.
Well, Al left the Shugart Associates,
Okay.
and Don Massaro took over as that, and the business was going along well, and that's where the mini floppy came from, and I left there. Al was replaced when Don Massaro took over as CEO, and I left there a little later because I needed to move on, and I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. And that's when I went over to a company called IMI, International Memories Incorporated, and they were building a 8-inch hard drive, but it was a big, bulky one. So I was there for, 8 months to a year, and that's where I thought about the idea of a smaller disk drive, the 5 1/4, basically the same size with the same mounting holes and the little red light on the front of what the mini floppies were, because the mini floppies were being used now in many of the computers as well.
Yeah. And 5 1/4 was a very important form factor to get into particularly a tower or a desktop computer.
Yes, the 5 1/4 was much better because they were building tower computers that goes under the desk, and it could also be a program load device, and it could be a data transfer device as well.
And tell me a little bit about your role there. Was it marketing and selling, customer development?
At IMI, I was in charge of the sales and marketing side of the larger 8-inch drive, and basically I got to think about this 5 1/4 inch size coming out of the mini floppy market. I said, what if you could put a hard drive in that form factor? And I asked the engineer, one of the engineers at IMI, if he could put a disk drive in the form factor of a mini floppy. So I gave him the mini floppy, and so he had a reference. I said, it's got to have the same mounting holes, and it's got to have a little red light on front, and it has to be used in those computers. And he brought me back a mock-up a few weeks later. He had cut down an 8-inch disk and put 2 of them in this form factor, and that's how it became. So the owner of the company, Carl Berg at the time, wanted me to stay focused on the 8-inch. So we had a meeting with the board of directors, and we arrived at a decision that I should leave the company. I said, fine, you can have your stock back, but I'll have the design and the concept of the small disc, the 5 1/4-inch disc. And he said, fine. So I called Al, and Al was in his restaurant bar in Santa Cruz, and I said, hey, I've got this idea. You want to do something with me? So we met, and I showed him what I had, and that's how it all began.
And was it Saeed Iftikhar who was involved in that early mechanical design there, or was it another mechanical engineer?
Yeah, when we started, it was just Al and I were trying to figure out what kind of business plan we'd have and where it would go and what markets and things like that. But we knew we had to have some engineers. We needed to have somebody who knew how to design disk drives, and we needed some operations. So the founders really of that, Seagate, was myself and Shugart, Doug Mann, Tom Mitchell for operations, Saeed Iftikhar.
Okay. So now you've left the IMI and started this new company. How'd you find money?
Well, that was a challenge because I had not been involved in that before, and Al and I were basically funding it off our credit cards for a while, and we said we had to get some money. So we found that a company, I think it was Oak Investments, came, venture capitalists, and they knew Al from before at IBM and different places. And so they invested the first $1 million into the company. And so that gave us a breather. Subsequent to that, we did license a few other people. We licensed TI to manufacture and market the product, Honeywell Bull, and one other company, which gave us another, I think it's about $3 million of non-equity funding, so that was good.
Well, there's a story behind how you decided who those licensees should be, isn't there?
Well, I felt, I knew Rod Canyon from before, and when he was at TI, and that's where we licensed him to do that. I assumed that TI would have difficulty being a major threat to us because these are moving items, and the products that they had primarily do not move.
Yeah. Semiconductors are different than disk drives, aren't they?
By far, yeah. So, and a couple other people, Honeywell Bull and one other one, and so they were looking to how to expand products in their line. So technically they could have been a competitor because it was a license to manufacture and market, which was unusual in those days. And so that helped us move to the next threshold.
Did any of them actually start selling a product that they manufactured?
No.
So it was free money in a way.
It was free money there.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
No dilution of the equity, and you have plenty of cash.
The original shareholders liked that.
All right. So you start developing this 5 1/4-inch drive, and I met you, I think, at that time, and you and Al, and you showed me the mock-up. Tell me about the mock-up and the early sales process.
Well, the mock-up was something I had the guys build for me, and it had a nice, pretty shiny disc in there, and it was in a little carrying case that I could show people, and they could see the plexiglass on top, see what's in it. So it was kind of an interesting sales tool. And so we talked about the storage capacity and where it could go and stuff like that. And where people were using mini floppies, 2 or 3 mini floppies per system, this was an ideal and timely solution for them for more storage.
Did you realize Did you realize at the time how big a game changer it was going to be in small computers?
No, we didn't have the faintest idea. We knew that if I could find enough people using mini floppies that could replace 1 of their or 2 of their mini floppies with this, it would be a good business. Mm-hmm. It was really when we ran into Compaq that really set us off, because Compaq was moving into the mobile computing. And so Rod Canyon, we showed them what we had, and they wanted that. Mm-hmm. So they were our first customer and a major investor.
And Apple and DEC were other customers at the time?
You know, I need to correct something.
That was 3.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you want to back up on that?
Yeah.
So you're out prospecting for with the mock-up of the 5.25 among various customers. How did that go?
Well, it was interesting, because some of the people that we had talked to were already using mini floppies. Mm-hmm. And so we would just go in and show them this is a product that could replace several of your mini floppies and give you more storage capacity. 5 megabytes in those days was a whopping amount of data. Quite often I was asked, why do we need that much storage? And we know now that's not a good question to ask.
Programs fill the available space.
That's for sure.
I remember programmers thinking they'd died and gone to heaven when they had 5 megabytes instead of a floppy drive.
Well, we had an interesting conversation. We were fortunate to meet Dr. Noyce at Intel and had a meeting there. And he said, Finis, he says, there's this number of programmers can program in 1 megabyte. He said, there's a larger number that can do in 5 megabytes. So that stayed in my mind, that you can't have more storage capacity for programmers than they can consume.
Well, and now we have Windows 11 that takes how many gigabytes to just get started?
Oh, I know it.
That's crazy, isn't it? I remember we invited you to DEC to come and show the wares and make that impression that this is really a game changer, and that led to an interesting story about an order with DEC.
You know, that was a great meeting, because I think it opened up the eyes of many of the DEC people there. This is moving, storage is moving, and size of computers are getting smaller. So we worked, and we were able to get to a point of having a contract with DEC, but the people that I was dealing with, the purchasing agent, engineering there, we had dinner one night in the Crow's Nest, which is in Santa Cruz, and I gave them a quote of a price for 3 years, and they wound up signing it. So I have the napkin today that shows the agreement there. Well, it's not agreement, but it was an idea of what the price was.
Basic order agreement.
Right.
And so promise that we're going to buy some.
Yeah.
And
someday.
The napkin story is kind of one of those iconic Silicon Valley stories where the deal is made at a bar and the purchase order is made on a napkin. It's kind of one that really happened that way.
It really happened. And, you know, in those days you could do those kind of things because you're dealing with people and they learn to trust you and you communicate well, and it worked out perfect.
Yeah, that's great. So you start ramping, finishing the development, and what were the big problems in getting going in the 5.25 business?
Well, the 5.25 was interesting because one, there were a lot of disk drive companies out there, and we had some people following very quickly from Quantum and Maxtor and all the others, and so and Miniscribe. So we had people. I think that wasn't right. Miniscribe was they 5.25?
I'm not sure. I think they were. Yes. There's a big scandal at Miniscribe, right, with shipping the bricks at one time? That was. Am I correct on that?
Shipping bricks. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They were aggressive, and I think it was a new management that took over, and they needed to make some shipments, and they were shipping bricks to different locations and things like that. One of the interesting things that IBM was one of our customers. And I would get a call from IBM said, "Don't ship anymore," and so did Miniscribe. And so we go, "Wow!" And the background is that Miniscribe kind of panicked. We got on a plane and went down. Tom Mitchell and the guys went down to Boca Raton, and what had happened? They saw all these drives in inventory, and so somebody panicked and called, "Don't send anymore." But in fact, if you look at their production level, that was only about a week's of production. So we got the other orders that they had canceled from Miniscribe.
Interesting.
Yeah,
well, that was a interesting byproduct of that scandal.
Very fortuitous.
I remember how they did that. They shipped the product a truckload just before the end of the quarter, and they could put it on their books. And of course, then it arrived at the customer the beginning of next quarter, and they'd say, "We didn't order this. Send it back."
That's right. That's right. And
I think somebody went to jail over that eventually, or they just got fines.
I don't know, probably did. Yeah.
So that was one of the big scandals in the storage business over the years. So the big customers at that time, and of course you start migrating upward in capacity, I think, in terms of the 5 1/4. And how was that going?
We were able to get some OEMs that were really helpful for us. And the OEMs really drive the direction and the changes in technology. And so we had, of course, DEC, and we had Hewlett-Packard and IBM and many of them that were integrating the product.
And they wanted more at some point?
Yes, of course. Once they get used to storage and they fill it up, it's you know, my wife hates me to say this, but it's like a woman's closet. You can't give her enough that she can't fill. At least my wife. That's probably sexist. I can't say that anymore.
Well, it's true in many marriages, I can assure you.
Yeah. So we had to go up the capacity curve, and at that time, people were moving in. Tossi was one. Other companies that were moving up in storage capacity and different technology. We were using some stepper motors, and they were using voice actuators and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So apparently, at some point, you and the other Shugart founders, Seagate founders, sorry, are seeing the future of the world a little differently. And how did that go? What was that discussion about?
Yeah, that was a difficult time for me and for the company, because we were very successful in selling that product and had lots of customers, but the competition was moving up in storage capacity, and our engineering team felt they didn't want to move that quickly or couldn't, and so I was a little bit frustrated being the face to the customers where they're asking for more and more. That we couldn't move them more quickly. And so long about that time, I felt that if I can't direct the direction of the company, then I probably should just move on, and that's what happened.
Mm-hmm. So now you're working on your golf game? Is that the next step?
Well, the next step was I said, wow, I left there and I've had some fun, and my wife traveled. We went to Europe, and we had our first child, and I said, hey, this is pretty good. So you know, at all this time, you're thinking about what is next, and well, it's actually kind of frightening, because if all of a sudden you wake up and you don't have a job, you have no place to go to, and you know, all my pals, I'd say, hey, let's go play golf, and they tell me, quit calling me, I have to go to work. So after I left Seagate, and I traveled a lot with my wife and had a lot of opportunities to look around, enjoy ourselves, I got a call from John Squires and Terry Johnson. Said they would like to talk to me about a product that they were considering or working on, and I said, well, they were in Colorado, and I said, well, I'll come see you, and I flew out there to meet with him, and John showed me the product. It was a small 3.5 inch, and I go, wow, that's kind of interesting. I said, I don't know where the market is for that. And they reminded me that things are getting smaller, computers are getting smaller, and that would be a good market segment. And so I thought about it a bit, and we talked some more, and I went on to my back home, and about a week later, John said, well, can we come talk to you some more about that? So they flew to my home, and we met and talked about it some more. And I'd looked into that, and I thought that was a good product for the trend lines in the marketplace where computers are getting smaller. Moving from the computer room to the desktop to mobile is kind of the trend line that was happening. We didn't do it, that's where it was going. Mm-hmm. And so we discussed this, and I said, okay, I'm willing to do this. And I said, John, I need to be kind of in the left seat. I need to set the direction and course and strategy. You give me the product and the technology, then I think that'll work. I said, you're living in Colorado, and I'm not going to move there. I'm living in California, you're not going to move there, so we have to figure that out. So that worked out good. Terry Johnson said, well, where do I fit in? And of course, there wasn't room in that cockpit for 3 people.
Yeah, I think Terry Johnson in his oral history said Finis came in the front door and I went out the back door. So, but John turned out to be a real wizard in the development of disk drives, didn't he?
To me, he's been the most under-recognized person that contributes probably the most to disk drive industry. John was a software guy, and worked at Storage Tech and did a lot of things. And he always tried to do things in software and firmware as opposed to hardware. And I used to say John would try to build a disk drive in a software, and where it wouldn't work, he added hardware. So he was just brilliant in his thought and how it happened.
We can come back to that a little bit, but
Yeah.
so you decided you're going to start a company. You're going to call it Connor Peripherals, put your name on it, and now we need to go find some money, right?
Yeah, so we had to kind of figure out how to get some money and what to do about that. And so I put some money in to keep it going. It started, and so we looked around and tried to get some money. And I need to pause here for a moment.
Sure.
I'm trying to get the funding that I got from Compaq. Yeah, that's it.
You knew Rod Canyon back all the way to IBM, apparently, right?
No, I knew him from TI.
Oh, from TI.
When I was selling the drive.
Okay.
Right. I knew him from TI.
Yeah.
So on the funding side of we had to have some funding, and Rod Canyon was doing Compaq at that time.
He was the CEO of Compaq.
CEO of Compaq. Ben Rosen introduced me to him, and I knew Rod, so I showed him our mock-up of this product. That was the 3.5 inch. Mm-hmm. And he was just making the first luggable computer. And of course, he previously had 2 5.25s in, and it made a significant...
more than a luggable.
Yeah, it was more than luggable, that's for sure. So Rod said, look, they need that product, and I needed money. And they decided that they would make an investment. And they said, how much are you looking for? They put $6 million, I believe, in first, and then later put another $6 million. Two conditions. One, I needed to vote all their shares. And two, I committed for the first year that they would get 80 to 90% of my production outlet. But I had to have some to salt the mines for other customers. Mm-hmm. And they agreed to that. So they helped us tremendously because they helped guide us in what chips to have and where to go. And John Squires worked with that team greatly, and it worked out great.
Mm-hmm. How did you cross paths with Ben Rosen? Because he was in the venture capital business at that time.
I met Ben in, I don't know, one of the trade shows or something like that, and he was a investor in early days of Compaq.
Compaq, yes.
And he was a great guy. Still is, I think.
Yeah. Yes. So you've got a big order and a big customer, and now how do you deliver?
Well, that was a real challenge because what Compaq was doing, they were launching their new product, and they needed a lot of product, and so Mitchell and the engineering team all really pulled together and gave us the ability by selecting the vendors we needed to be able to ramp. We didn't have an idea it was going to be that big, mm-hmm. to be honest with you. And but I think it was like 113 million in the first year.
In the first year, wow.
And
so that was a record, right, in terms of a company startup reaching a revenue of that magnitude?
It was, and a funny aside on that, Rod called me when the announcement, when they showed him the sales in the first year, and they represented about 90% of that. And previous to that, I think Compaq held the record for the first sales. And what I recall is Rod telling me that, if I'd known you were going to ship that much, I would have cut the orders. I said, I wish you had, I'd have made more profit. Now that may be a figment of my imagination, but that was the impact that we knew we were dealing with something really big. And as we got more customers, more OEM customers, going off the base of what Compaq was needing, it was phenomenal.
So, you know, that the whole problem of a startup to ramping production is a really big problem. You started opening plants. Who helped you with that, and how'd that go?
Well, Mitchell was the one that took care of the operations. He did a brilliant job, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know many people that I know of could have done that. I mean, if you think about it, from the first year was 113 million, and the second was 256, and then 700, and then 1.3 billion. Those are not numbers that most people see. And so we had to have factories. We went to Singapore. We had all over the place trying to do something. We were getting customers all over the world. And so we had some real challenges there, getting our vendor base up to support that kind of ramp. Mm-hmm. And along the way, we had to go buy a disc company because we couldn't get enough media.
And who was that?
That was Domain.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember who.
The head company, or?
It was a media company, Domain. I can't remember who was in charge of that. Greg Reyes was on their board, and he negotiated the deal with us.
And he was one of your venture investors at that time?
No, I just knew Greg from a period of time. Yeah.
Okay. So who else rounded out the team? It was Tom Mitchell, who you'd worked with at Shugart, right?
Right.
Prior, and Seagate.
Right.
And now
Doug
you
Mann.
brought him in. Doug Mann.
Mm-hmm.
And who else was, Syed Iftikhar was.
Syed Iftikhar.
And of course not Terry Jones, but John Squires driving the engineering.
Right.
So how did the company evolve there? Is it,
Now, wait a minute, we're probably confused there. Connor was John Squires.
Right.
Myself, Doug Mann. Oh no, yeah, I'm confused.
All right, I confused you. So it's Connor is John Squires, right?
Right.
Because you got Shugart becomes Seagate, you got Seagate, and then you got Connor, right?
Right, that's right.
Everybody gets, which was which now? We look back.
I have that problem, obviously.
So we have John and Tom Mitchell in Connor, right? And Doug Mann? No, Doug Mann was not part of that. Okay.
No. So it was really the two of us, John and myself, were the founders of it, and we brought in other people. I'm trying to think. I don't think we had. Those are the two founders of the company.
Yeah, right. So Terry Johnson said this about John. John was an incredible microcoder who basically set up a kind of matrix of microcode, basically and very economically done, but in a way it turned out that Connor was able to introduce product after product in a very rapid basis. So that was really, this whole rapid evolution of technology really started going great guns at Connor.
That was the enabling technology, I believe, to allow us to make those quick changes and adjustment to meet customer needs. And those are the days where the OEMs were moving fairly quickly and recycling products, one-upping each other. So we had to keep track of that. So that's very a good observation from Terry, because John gave us the tools to be able to make changes without major redesigns. And so we could enhance it up in capacity and function, and even in form factor.
Mm-hmm. Now, at one time you were known as the proponent of cell design build. Tell us a little bit about where that came from and what that really means.
Well, it became really relevant to me, and when we had a discussion, when we went down to Compaq and met with Rod Canyon people, our thought was the interface should be a SCSI interface, because that was the next high performance interface. And we said, this is our idea, our drive, and it'll have a SCSI interface. And they said, no, we don't want SCSI. We have to be IBM compatible. And I go, okay, it's an IBM compatible interface. What that crystallized in my mind is you got to listen to the customers, to what they want, what they need, or sometimes what they don't know. And so that becomes, in my idea, the selling process. If you can sell something that they want to buy, that makes the design stage much more crisp and less risky. Once you have that design that the customer wants, now you go build that design. So the risk of operation goes down dramatically. So that's how I kind of came to that tagline. But it's not new. I mean, Boeing has been doing that for years, right? And so we use that as kind of our mantra. If you can't get the customer to understand what he wants or what he will need, then he's not ready. So we use that as kind of our mantra.
And one of the other mantras was, if you don't have the OEM customers, you're done.
Well, you know, I've seen companies with hundreds or thousands of salesmen all trying to sell small pieces, and I said, we can't do that. One, I didn't know how to do that, so it may have been just because I didn't know how to do it. So working with OEMs where you could work with them, get designed in and manufactured to their schedule. And what happened is once an OEM buys it, his competitor starts to look at it. And so it kind of perpetuates itself that way.
Yeah. So now you're the boss, the CEO of a very rapidly growing company. What did that mean to you personally to grow into those shoes over time?
I had very little time to think about it, but occasionally I did. And I realized that with the growth that we were seeing, I didn't have the skill sets that are needed to kind of be there. So Bill Schrader, who had a company, I think it was called Priam, disk drive company, I asked him to join us because he was a professional, he's a manager, he's been in that business, and I felt I could get a lot of help from him. So he joined us as the president and did a great job for us. Bill and I had different styles and things like that, but he was a good sounding board for me. As we went further along, an additional person that we hired later on, it was Bill Allman. And Bill Allman ran a big division of storage at IBM. I go, wow, if I can get somebody who knows how to do that out of IBM, I can learn a lot from him. So he came on as the president of that. Bill moved to vice chairman and helped continue things, and then he left. So it was a continuous challenge. And at one time we were hiring 3,000 people a month around the world. You can't be very accurate in all of those hires, and so it was a challenge keeping the staffing going, training them, and getting it going. But we had to do that.
You know, one of the pieces of advice I got in my career is the CEO sets the tone. You know, it kind of establishes the culture. What would you say the culture of Connor was like?
Customer first. That's been my driving force all the time, is that if you can understand what he wants or needs or will need, and if you have the relationship that he can trust you and you have the ability to perform, you'll have a customer for a long time. And that proved to be true for us. And that worked through European customers, Asian customers, Japan, all over.
So ramping Connor, you had set up factories around the world, but the first one was in Longmont, wasn't it?
It was in Longmont. John lived there, and we had a small little factory there. The first time after we merged the two companies, I went back to meet the other employees that they had hired already. Interesting young lady came up to me and said, Mr. Connor, I get stock options from different companies I've been with, and none has ever paid off. And she said, is this going to make me some money someday? I said, you know, that stock you hold on to, it'll be worth $1 million someday. She kind of snickered. She says, okay. 3 years later, is worth $1 million.
So, you know, you're consuming cash, obviously, growing, buying inventory, building factories. You need money.
Oh.
So, raising money.
Raising money is interesting, and what we did is we got the first from Compaq, a total about 12 million or so like that. But given the ramp and what we were trying to do, we needed a lot of working capital. And Steve Doyle, who was with Montgomery Securities, I went up there and made my presentations in San Francisco, and he became the lead to help raise money. So we went to Wall Street, we did all those kind of things, and we raised money from Wall Street more than investors or VCs. And it was interesting. At one time, about 4 years later, I was back there to raise another big round, convertible debentures. And one of the investors who had invested with us all along, he said, Finis, he says, you were just here a year ago raising money. And I said, I told you then that the reason I need money is to take advantage of a bigger opportunity. And I said, you know, you've made a lot of money so far off of us. This might be something you want to consider. He said, yeah, okay, I'm in.
Great.
But it was interesting. In the early days, we made a lot of profits. Not great margins, but we made a lot of profits. And I think by the 6th or 7th year, we had raised about 1.7 billion of capital. Mm-hmm. And I got a call from one of the investors and got the reports. Of course, they're public by then. He says, I see you have about 1.7 billion in cash. I says, isn't that good? That's a good news. So we had as much money in cash that we raised over the time.
That's terrific.
We was kind of
That makes the shareholders smile, I think.
We had a lot of happy shareholders.
Yes. So along the way, you go public. When was that, and you know who helped you with that?
A gentleman named Tommy Unneberg with Unneberg Tobin, I think was the name of his company at the time. He was going to take us public, and we were having a meeting, kind of a final meeting to talk all about it and what we need to do and stuff like that. And on that day, the market was crashing. And about an hour through the meeting, Tommy looked at not his phone, but he got a message that the market's crashing. And he said, look, we don't need to have any more meetings. This is not going to go for right now because the market just crashed. And I can't remember, maybe it was 6 months later or something like that, it looked out and we went public.
Mm-hmm. And you did the road show primarily on the East Coast, or?
We did San Francisco. We did a lot of time in New York. I don't know if we went to Europe on the IPO. I don't think we did. Mm-hmm. But subsequent to that, we did go to Europe often.
Mm-hmm. And how'd it go when the opening bell rang? Did you ring the bell? And was
no,
it NASDAQ
I didn't. I didn't get to do that, but it was very interesting to see it happen. We were back when it happened, and we were on the OTC.
Okay.
And so it was exciting, and especially as the stock started going up, of course, everybody gets excited about it.
Yes.
Start counting up how much money they have.
Yeah. So all that growth, and I think you said there were like 4 records: fastest to 100 million, and fastest to 1 billion, and maybe there's some other ones. You got some recognition along the way.
Well, the Fortune magazine did an article on us, the fastest growing company in U.S. history at that time, and that was, I think, we were like 1.7 billion or something like that. That was quite interesting because managing that growth, both in people, resources, vendors, production, sales, everything, was a challenge. And but we did it. And part of it, people say, well, how'd you do that? I said, the market just pulled us through in spite of ourselves sometimes. You know, you just have to go do it.
So you were named Entrepreneur of the Year by 2 institutions, I think?
We were fortunate enough to get the Entrepreneur of the Year from Stanford and Harvard in the same year.
Never been done before.
Never been done before, as I was told. Little side story on that, in San Francisco, we were going to receive the award from Harvard, the alumni and the people there. So it was up at in San Francisco. And so I get up to speak and talking about all these graduates from Harvard out there. And Bill Schrader was a Baker Scholar from Harvard, just a brilliant guy. And so I'm always kind of kidding around. I said, you know, the difference between Bill and I, you know, we were in the men's room doing what we're supposed to do, and I start to leave, and Bill says, hey, you know, at Harvard they teach us not to wash our hands after going to the bathroom. I said, well, I went to San Jose State, and they teach us not to pee on our hands. My wife just turns beet red. He turns red. So everybody laughs, and we had a good time with that.
It's great to celebrate those moments, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It really is.
So things progress at Connor, and the competition really starts heating up. Everybody else is getting into 3.5 and even 2.5. What did you think about the 2.5-inch opportunity?
The 2.5 was something that I didn't see at all, but I was led there by one of our customers, Toshiba. A gentleman named Mizuguchi. We had a meeting with him, a strategy meeting, and he was always a funny guy. And he says, Finis, he says, I have a rule of 2s. I said, Mizuguchi-san, what is that? He says, 2 inches, 200 megabytes, and $200. He says, that's what I need. I go, he just defined what we needed. He worked with us on what he needed and stuff like that, but he was instrumental in really directing us in that direction.
And that was a 2.5-inch
2.5 inch.
hard drive
Right.
for notebooks, I would assume, right, at the
Right.
time? Toshiba's in the notebook business.
They loved it.
They loved it.
Yeah.
And other customers that picked up on the 2.5?
Yeah, a lot of the laptop guys. And laptops, of course, were there, but they didn't have that kind of storage, and so that we sold to NEC and Toshiba and a lot of people in Japan and throughout the world who were bringing those up.
So the relationship with Toshiba really helped you open up the Japanese market.
Totally.
Yeah, that's terrific.
And we had some great people giving us some references, and I'm not references, giving us some guidance as where it's going. So we had a lot of insight with all the OEMs as where the kind of overall market was going, and that helped us do the proper job of planning.
So we're talking about the 1992 planning book, which looked like it summarized every aspect of Connor's business and the future product plan and amazingly deep competitive analysis. What were you doing then? Well, what was the purpose?
Well, the purpose of that, we could see that the market for our products were really substantially growth ahead of us, even though we'd been through a lot. I think that was like our 4th year or something like that. If it was, that was like 1.7 billion. I mean, where does it go from here? And so we had to do a better job of planning because we were hitting against the wall with vendors and employees, skill sets, all that kind of stuff. So I asked them to put together a plan of everything that we need to know in competitive market, customers, employees, all of that. And that book came out of that. It was a little larger than I expected, but I think the management did a great job pulling that together.
Yeah, I think it's on the order of 300 pages. It's something that you should donate to the Computer Museum at some point in the future.
I haven't even, I hadn't at that time read a book for 300 pages.
So I need a little break here to think about where we're going next.
Yeah.
Where should we be going next? There was a point out of that I missed. So your growth continues to more billions of dollars, and along the way, things change a bit. What's happening in the market?
Well, the key things that changed was really the size and scope of what we had and the global breadth of what we had to do in getting communications and stuff like that. It's hard to keep everybody headed in the same direction. And so communicating to the employees, to the vendors, to the customers was a big challenge that I felt I had to be out front. And I was flying all over the world. Every quarter, for instance, I would fly around the world seeing customers and employees and vendors and things like that. I think that's about when we reached about $2 billion, I was doing every quarter around the world for about 2 weeks. I was flying 500 hours a year in an airplane. And so that was probably the biggest challenge. Our growth has slowed down, but our efficiencies didn't stay in place. Like many companies, we had too many employees in the wrong place, or too many vice presidents and not enough workers. That's what big companies do.
Sure.
And so we worked hard to bring that in sync.
It's always a challenge when you're anticipating the growth and then the line bends over, and now what do we do, right? And a number of companies right now going through that in the information business. It's kind of interesting.
Well, when you reach that point, and the first thing that everybody looks at, well, is the factory being utilized? Well, no, it's not. So what do we do with all those people? And you have to take action to scale that back. The biggest and hardest decisions sometimes to make are the people in headquarters, and they've been there a long time. So I tried to get every employee to see what he does, what he contributes to that dollar of sale, and from the invoice to anything out there, and it helped somewhat, because if they don't know how they fit in, what they contribute to the company, the management can't tell, why am I paying them that?
Yes.
So it's an efficiency model that I tried to do. It didn't do very well, but
yeah, I remember trying that. Think about what you're doing, and is that for the benefit of the customer? And it kind of gets people into a different mindset about, well, is this just paper pushing I'm doing, or bureaucracy, or is it really value added that
right.
moves our position with the customer forward? So how do we? At some point, the company merges with Seagate, and that's down the road.
Yeah, that was like our 10th year, I think.
10 years, okay.
Yeah, I think we were doing about 2.7 billion that year, I think. And I knew we were running out of gas, and it was a big issue. But also I saw Seagate as a big company, us as a big company. The margins weren't great. And Seagate had high-end products, high-capacity products. And we had the lower capacity, but smaller form factors and things like that. They had heads, we had disk. And Al was still heading up that, but he and I we weren't talking about potential mergers. He had a person that we worked with. And it just seemed like it was the right time, bring them two together, and with all of our market shares added to theirs, and our components our components adding to theirs, seemed like the right combination. As we sit here today with only 3 suppliers in the world, it was probably very fortuitous to do that.
Right. So that happens, I think, in 1996. Is that?
I think it was 96, 97. Yeah.
96, 97. And are you going to take a role in Seagate at that point, or?
No. It was there was a lot of competitiveness between the two companies across the board. Once we got the final merger done, I think the Connor names on all the buildings were down in like 48 hours. One of the things they did, which I was disappointed in, that they fired most of the Connor salesmen, which had the relationships with the customers, and so correspondingly the sales went down. But they recovered from that.
Right.
And I have to say, today the management they have in that company is amazing. It's amazing, and many of the people that were at Connor are in senior management over there. So I'm pleased to see that.
Right. But Al was in charge at that point when the merger occurred.
Correct.
Al Shurgart. Okay. And Steve, and then Al leaves Seagate at some point.
Right.
And Steve Lusso comes in.
Right.
He was the next CEO.
Correct.
Some period of time.
He was a good people person and very astute financially, and so I think he brought some discipline to the company that they didn't have.
So when you look back at that story, in fact, it's a little hard to look back because things have changed so much. Anyway, we won't go there yet. Let's talk about leaving Connor and what's next for you.
Well, left Connor, and again, when you wake up and don't have a place to go or people to go play golf with or anything like that, you kind of wonder, what do I do next? And I, as in '97, that was a few years ago for me. So I looked around and I said, what can I do? And typical of a lot of entrepreneurs, you think because you did well here, you can do well here. It doesn't work that way. And I started another little company and to try to make a lower cost disk drive. And that was fine, and we were doing fine, but the market moved away from that.
This is the $100 disk drive
Right.
vision. Right.
So that one shut down. And then I looked at some other things. I made some investments in company, and in a couple occasions they would bring me in thinking I could be this savior, and I couldn't do it either. So I had several investments like that, and didn't work out. The one that I think will be successful is a company called Century Card. I started as called Blue Store, and it was a credit card size with a fingerprint detector and large storage capacity and things like that for security, personal security and identity. I left there a few years ago, the management team, and they got more money from the investors. They scaled back what I had identified as what the product should be, and it was the right decision. And today they're doing very well. So
Right.
I'm hopeful that'll bear fruit sometime.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like what, the 10 investments yield 1 home run and 2 living dead and 7 failures.
That's exactly right. I've learned that.
Me too.
I was sending a note to somebody, my tax person actually, about the companies I've started and companies that have failed, and there are more fails than successes. And I said to her, it's really, I think I found my calling of running a company as opposed to, starting a company versus investing in companies.
Yeah, a little more of the control and maybe what the outcome might be.
That may be the commonality of it.
So is there some general advice for entrepreneurs in that you could share?
You know, having the spirit of an entrepreneur you have to learn what that means in its risk, its management of risk. And I always try to, these are silly little things, but I always tell my guys what I would do when I go in the front door of some place or some opportunity. I want to know where the back door is, because you never know when you might need that. And so that you have to think longer than just the upside. Mm-hmm. What can go wrong? What's the alternative to that? And I still see that today with big companies. They still don't grasp it. Successful companies still aren't looking far enough ahead to know the consequences of changes in the industry.
Yes. When you look back at the storage business, you've shared some thoughts with me about where we're headed in terms of the amount of data that's needed in the world, and where we are in terms of kind of the food supply of storage for that. What are you thinking there?
Well, it's kind of interesting. A lot of the analysts and a lot of people in the drive business are talking about the potential growth for data. They're talking zettabytes. In my day, we didn't know what a zettabyte was, but they're talking 150 zettabytes of storage, of data, that's being created. And if you look at where it's all coming from, predominantly from us, the individuals, and you look at a company like Google or Facebook, who take that data, they get it for free, and they remarket it into digital advertising. And they're billion and trillion dollar companies. So something has to change there, both on the source of it, the storage of that data, and the payment of that data back to the people who create it. And that's going to happen. But what's missing in my mind is that with 3 disk drive companies, and everything dealing with data has at some point in time required a disk drive. With 3 sources of disk drives, any disruption in the source of that, and we've had several in the last few years, will have major consequences, because the total dependency on storage by many applications in cars and planes and everything else is there. So my concern and what I'm looking into is, what is the magnitude of that potential disruption, and what could it cause, and then correspondingly, what can you do about it?
And you have a company you're advising now. I think it's called Cirrus.
I'm advising on the board of a company called Cirrus, and CIRUS, and they have come up with a process and a plan where they can capture your data. They can resell it into the digital marketing world and send back to you through cryptocurrency or regular currency and pay you something for that. Mm-hmm. And that could be done by big companies if they chose to. Mm-hmm. If you look at the margin they make on their data, they can certainly afford to pay you, the creator of that data, something for it. So I think that's going to happen, and it's getting more popular. And of course, with the cryptocurrency fad, it's a good mechanism to get people involved in that.
And of course, EU is moving pretty strongly into protection of private data, so that's going to put pressure on that whole ecosystem of you're the product, right?
That's right. And that's a good point, because Europe is putting a lot of pressure on it. And, you know, of course, the pressure on all the social networks here in the U.S. and government, can the other social networks come into the U.S.? Are they a threat to people? You know, it has to be somewhat modified on the social networks. Mm-hmm.
And you'd go long on investing in disk drive companies now, too.
Absolutely. I'm an investor, and you know, if you look at the disk drive industry in the last year, their stock has dropped about 50%, but demand is going up, and there's only 3 suppliers. I don't understand that.
Sounds like an opportunity.
Well, if I read the analyst reports, historically in the disk drive industry, their view is very short. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen this quarter, or did they miss it by a penny, or things like that. The disk drive industry is not something you want to invest in unless you're a big trader and you can trade it that way. Yeah. But I think they will get recognized as being a major contributor to the whole infrastructure of data.
Sure, when you look at these data centers that use tens of megawatts of power, and some very substantial part of that's going into disk drive.
That's right.
It's kind of an interesting way to look at the market.
I saw a statistic that about 1.8% of the global energy is servicing those servers.
Amazing. What else is you'd like to tell us about yourself and the future?
Well, the good thing about the future is always coming. And just like anything, whether it's family or friends or anything you do, you have to look ahead to try to anticipate what's happening, take the best data you can. And you need to find that back door or some opportunity. So there's opportunity and there's challenges. And I think with my own family, I've recognized I have to do that better than I have in the past. And so I think that's something that we'll have to spend a little more time in as we move forward.
And personally, you said to me, you've moved 25 times in the course of this business career. And there's one more coming?
There's one more, and I hate to call it this, the final resting place, but but it's, yeah, we're moving back to where our friends and family are, and enjoy life.
Great. We wish you well on that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for this.
You bet.